Sharpton called on Africans on the continent and in the diaspora to unite. Let's take a listen to this recorded message by Reverend Sharpton in honor of Steve Biko.
First, let me say how honored I am to have been asked by the Steve Biko Foundation to give the address this year. And I am particularly honored talking to his son and knowing that his family members, his widow, and others were watching. Because as one that grew up in the movement in the United States since I was a pre-teenager, Steve Biko was a real hero to us in the United States. And to understand the impact of what Biko and the Black consciousness movement of South Africa meant to us, you'd have to understand the parallel journeys of the struggle for freedom and equality and justice in South Africa and the United States, what it meant. Those of us that are in the United States, we are in a precarious position as those in South Africa are in a position of real movement toward real change in an economic as well as political way. It goes back 400 years when we were brought here against our will and was made to work in the United States, particularly in the South, but also in the North, and work for no wages, and was, in fact, the reason that the United States became the economic power globally that it became. What made the United States economy was cotton and tobacco and other things that we were the labor force for and never got paid. Anyone that goes into a business that becomes a profitable business with no overhead, it's not hard to become very wealthy. And that's what the United States did. To justify it, they had to be able to make us less than human, because if you talked about our humanity and that we were equal to them, then you could not justify not behaving in an equal manner in terms of wages and in terms of political participation and other things with other human beings. The same thing happened in South Africa. Part of to oppress people is to dehumanize them. Part of enslaving people is to make them think that they are not more than worthy of being a slave. I cannot make you go work every day. I cannot make you labor and watch my wealth grow while you are in dire poverty unless I convince you that that is your lot in life, that is your destiny, that's your fate. Once I convince you of that, then I don't have to even monitor you. You will monitor yourself, because you're manifesting what you think your life purpose, position, and function is. So over the breakdown of enslaved Africans in the U.S. was to legally make us 3/5 of a man, was to break up our families. It was against the law for us to marry. We could not name our children after ourselves. We were not humans. Can't name your child after you. Your child is named after the master. Can't marry. That's for human beings. And this drilling down made us, by 2 or 3 generations in, feel that we were born to be slaves. As time went, and there were those that rose up, and there was the abolitionist movement in the 1800s, and finally we saw the Civil War where the North and the South fought the Confederates against the Union. Don't be misled. It was about business. The North and the unions wanted to control the economy one way. The Southern agrarian farmers, plantation owners, slave owners wanted to keep the control their way. The way that the Union knew that they could dislocate the power of the South was to do what? Take their profit from them. How do you take their profit from them? You take their slaves from them, because now they don't have free labor. So it was never about, in many of those leading at that time in terms of the Union, it was never about freeing the slaves. It was about crippling the economy of their opposition in the South. Now, there was some abolitionists that legitimately were fighting for the freedom of the slaves based on human rights principles, but that was not, in my judgment, what the total Union leadership was about. Some were, some were not. But as they got down to the critical battles, there were those that kept saying to then President Abraham Lincoln, you need to free the slaves and let them join the Union Army because they can back the Confederates up. The Confederates are winning major battles. They had got as far as Virginia. Finally, Lincoln belatedly freed the slaves only in the southern states, only in Confederate states, and didn't pay them equal to others, because then they would have been equal humans. But absolutely, as those freed slaves joined the Union armies, they backed up, and Robert E. Lee was defeated and the Confederates lost and the Union won. That is why I laugh when I hear people say that Abe Lincoln freed the slaves. In many ways, the slaves fought and freed Abe Lincoln. Then we were given a period of reconstruction, and we could vote, and we elected over 20 members of the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate, blacks. But then the backlash came. Ku Klux Klan, White Citizens Council, people that would fight with terroristic tactics to kill, lynch, and maim us. And then it was not those terrorists, those white terrorists in the white sheets. It was those in the black robes, the Supreme Court, that gave every decision against our full citizenship. Which is why in the early part of the 20th century, when Reconstruction was over, by the time we reached the 1900s, we had no blacks in the Congress, none in the Senate. And we're being lynched all over the country. It was at that point people went into Niagara Falls, New York, and formed the NAACP, later National Urban League. It was also at that point in South Africa, as you were fighting for your humanity, that the African National Congress was formed, and it studied the NAACP. And we have the 20th century, the growth of two movements. I don't need to remind you the battles there or the battles here, but I wanted to give you the background of what we were battling from. Because to understand why Steve Biko meant so much to us is you must understand the parallel movement of consciousness. Harriet Tubman, the famous freedom fighter who helped build the Underground Railroad, and it was used to get slaves out of Southern servitude into the North and even to Canada where they would be free. She was given an award once saying, "We salute this hero of the struggle who led to the freedom of 500 slaves. And she, in receiving the award, said, "I could have freed more if I could have convinced them they were slaves." It's a heavy statement there. What she's really saying is what I led with. They had to convince us that we were slaves. They had convinced us, no, you're just less than human, but you're part of the family. You're like our pets, like our dogs, our cats, and our blacks. That's who you are. And we accepted that. We were raised in it, ingrained in it. It was our self-definition, which is why as movements grew in the 20th century, both in South Africa and in the United States, to get us the right to vote, to get us the right to use the same public accommodations others did, to break the grip of Jim Crow in the States, to break the grip of apartheid in South Africa. The only way you could do that, the only way you could make it permanent, the only way you could deal with it is you had to change the mind of Africans in South Africa and in the US, because your behind follows your mind. And if your mind is enslaved, your behind will be subjected to all that the oppressors put on you. Oppressors never retire. Oppression does not depend on oppressors changing their mind. Oppression stops when the oppressed change their minds. And as we got in the middle of the 20th century, in America, the Black consciousness movement started. And the Black cultural movement started. And the Black Power movement started. And the parallel was Steve Biko and the Black consciousness movement in South Africa. And we started going from mourning and being depressed and suppressed mentally to where we went into a rising consciousness of affirmation and embracing ourselves and saying we are not less than human. In fact, we are part of the origins of creative human life itself. We can think and perform and create as well as or better than anyone in the universe. All of the great sciences started right in Africa. How dare you reduce our humanity? And that consciousness that Biko represented and the Black Power movement in the United States represented, including Angela Davis, who did one of these lectures before I did, was given the honor this year. That is what changed our mind, because once you change your mind, then you will not accept being treated less than what you are. How do they respond? The same way they did in the late 1800s. The policing was started to keep us in our place. And now policing is being misused again. Not all police, but some is being used to dramatically and graphically let us know there are different rules for you. We can put our knee on your neck 8 minutes and 46 seconds and kill you. We can shoot you in the back 7 times and kill you. We can do whatever, and it may not be covered by the law books, but it's different laws, different places. Why do you know that, Reverend Al? Because there's no record of you putting your knee on your neck in other communities, in white communities, or there's no consistency of these abuses in other communities. And when I look at even the policing now in South Africa, it seems various select regions and areas and class of people are the ones that are the victims. And that is why remembering Biko and remembering the consciousness and remembering the humanity that we are becomes important. That's why these slogans started that has now become the rallying cry of all of us, whether we're in national organizations like mine, National Action Network, or NAACP, or whether it is organic movements in the street, all of us under the banner of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was started by three brilliant young sisters. They coined that phrase the night that a white man named George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin was going to his father's home, nothing but Skittles in his hand and a liquid drink. And this man, a self-appointed security guard, saw him as a suspect, as less than human. What is he doing in the neighborhood? Must be up to something bad, and killed him. And a jury found nothing wrong with that, which again affirms the supremacy of others. Can you imagine if that was the reverse? If a black self-appointed security guard had killed a young white guy who only had a beverage and Skittles and had no authority by the state to even ask the question why he was there, that a jury would find nothing wrong with that? That is why those three young girls came up with Black Lives Matter, and it became a slogan that many of us adopted. But when I look across the ocean at Biko, who was killed by police because they are there to enforce the given order of the day of those in charge. Don't forget, Steve Biko was a victim of police brutality, of law enforcement going beyond the law to be a political weapon to keep people in line. Because the danger of Biko was if he changed their minds, they will not accept apartheid. If he changes their mind, they will demand the right to vote and to choose who's going to be the office holders. If he changes their minds, they will demand not to work the land, but to own the land and the minerals. And why is this economy thriving and we are not part of it? If they change their minds, it will change the social order. And that's why Biko was a threat. That's why he had to go. And that's why the consciousness that emanated from him is what helped change South Africa. And it is not finished. And that changing of mind here with the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement changed our minds, because we went then from being called colored, designated by others, and Negroes, a term invented by others, to being black and African American, embracing who we were and embracing what we were, and knowing that we all are people that have been chosen and blessed by God with life itself. So that is why the consciousness changing is from the basis of what led to 94, when you elected a new government. Well, you first had to change people's minds to even know you could deserve the right to vote and bring in a new government. And that is why when we changed our mind, and James Brown singing Black and Proud, and Nina Simone singing Young, Gifted, and Black, it began to make us feel we could do more than live in poverty. We can do more than being servants of low wages. And we went with that struggle from the 60s to electing and re-electing a black president, a man whose name it took us months to even adjust to pronouncing correctly, Barack Obama. It changed our minds. But in changing our minds, we must not settle for too less. Because not only we are equal to everyone else, we must have the ability and the empowerment of everyone else. What I mean by that, we've gained political power. Now we must have the economic power. We've had a president and a attorney general, black, but we still are 1/10 in terms of the median income level, blacks to white in the United States. Today, we are 10% of what whites earn in the median income level of blacks. Oh, Reverend Al, they're black billionaires. Yes, there's a few here and in South Africa. But you do not judge the equality and fairness of a society and a people by judging the few at the top. You judge it by the mass at the bottom. Until the masses are lifted, we are not where we need to be yet. Land ownership, home ownership, where are we? The consciousness of Biko says we should be land owners and land developers and business owners, and the minerals in the land that we were born and raised ought to be more in our hand. Otherwise, if we don't have that as the next step and make that the fact of life, we will hold political office where we will manage things for others' wealth. We become their administrators rather than the leaders of the nation. And that is the fight that we still must fight. And those that are the protectors of the status quo, the police, must work on behalf of protecting the citizens, not keeping them in line, whether it is in South Africa or whether it is in the US. The mentality is keep them in line. Make sure there's peace and order so that business can go on. Keep them in their township, keep them in their ghetto in the States. Because people have to conduct business downtown. So your job is to go in there and keep them in line. And if you gotta put your knee on their neck, if you gotta shoot them in the back, if you gotta go in their house like Breonna Taylor and shoot them in their beds, keep them in line. And that is unacceptable to those of us that are conscious. That is why we look at the cases there in South Africa and identify with them as we deal with the cases here in the United States. There will always be the backlash, like the backlash in the late 1800s. Donald Trump in the United States, in my judgment, is the backlash to Barack Obama. To look up and say a man of color, a black man, take an economy that had collapsed. When Barack Obama was elected, we were losing in the United States 200,000 jobs a month. He turned the economy around just like the freed enslaved members of the Union Army, he saved the nation. Despite the fact they lied on him, saying, oh, he wasn't even born in the United States, he was born in Kenya, and this, that, and the other. He saved the nation because he had changed his mind, and in his performance, he changed the minds of many of us that prepare us now to fight on for the economic battles. When I was born and raised, we dreamed of just being able to get by. But now our sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters can dream of being the president of the United States or the president of South Africa. But can they dream of owning the bank and owning the businesses? And can they dream of a police department that is there to protect their interest, not to protect others' interests from us? That's the consciousness of Biko. That's why we can't let what he raised and others in a parallel movement here raised be forgotten. Because to forget them is to forget ourselves and forget who we are and forget why we are. Movements are about continuity, every round going further and further. Movements are about one lap after another lap. You don't win a fight because you won one round. You fight till the end. And the end has not come yet, as long as we can have high positions, but any one of us be the next victim of wayward police. As long as we can have high positions in South Africa, but still be submitted to police and still not have the economic interest to match our population. How are you the majority of a country with the minority of the industry and business? And that's the continuation of struggle. That's not blamed on those that led the struggle to bring us into politics, because politics sets us up for the next stop. Rather than fight each other, we need to fight the consciousness that still makes us unequal. One of the things I say to those in the United States that want to, oh, well, we should be this, that, or the other, the old guard didn't do this, the old guard didn't do that. Don't get tricked into the generational fights. Young Turks versus the old, no. It is the old and the young versus those that still seek to exploit us and use their frontline people to keep us in line. We are not each other's problem. We are each other's solution. And the crabs in the barrel mentality is those that want to see us snatching each other down, attacking each other like crabs in a barrel, thinking that we've got to climb on each other's back to get to the top. But all we need to do when you're crabs in a barrel is unite to take the lid off the barrel, because if you take the lid off the top of the barrel, you'll find out there's enough room for all of us. The problem is we've been put in a barrel we should have never been in the beginning. And if we would take the energy that we have in fighting each other and find common ground to fight for our economic and judicial empowerment, we would take the lid off and not be contained by those that profit and benefit off of where we are. So, in the name of Steve Biko, who inspired young activists like me who have been blessed to live longer than him, we must raise the consciousness of our people across the African diaspora, whether they're fighting in the Caribbean or fighting in South America or fighting all over the African continent or fighting in Europe or fighting for George Floyd or Breonna Taylor in the United States, is one fight. It's a fight against white supremacy and a fight against a white supremacist mentality and a fight that, just like we broke up the black family when we brought them here, kidnapped to be slaves, and we sold the father to one state and the mother to another state and the children another state. We had to break y'all up to control you. Once we broke you up, we told you how to think. Once we broke you up, we detached you from your history. Once we broke you up, we severed your emotions of love to one another. Once we broke you up, we broke you down. We need to reconnect. And we need to re-involve ourselves with our roots and put our family, African family, back together. We are not just out here on our own, doing our own thing. We're connected to something. We're connected to each other. The strength of a tree is not determined by its branches or its height. The strength of a tree is determined by its roots. And if you disconnect a tree from its roots, no matter how beautiful it may look, it will die. But if you strengthen the roots survive storms. The roots survive season changes. We are rooted together. And the strength of our roots is our consciousness. And that's what Biko taught us. And that's what we must do now to finish this economic and mission around policing. Why? Because we can expect nothing less, because that's who we are. We are not what we were designated to be. We are who we are destined to be. You have a choice. Will you accept their designation or your destiny? I say, let's join hands across the ocean and rise up together to our destiny in the name of Stephen Biko and Mandela, Martin Luther King, and others that fought.
It was a civil rights activist, Al Sharpton, Reverend Al Sharpton, that recorded message, of course, a part of the Steve Biko Memorial Lecture. Just a quick recap, sort of saying exactly what Steve Biko said, that racism is internalized by its victims, and he said the fight continues. He spoke about George Floyd in the United States, about systemic oppression, and this backlash, saying the US President Donald Trump, part of the backlash after having a black president, Barack Obama. He said black people have democratic power, but still economic power elusive, and an incredible stat there that black people generally, on average, earning 1/10 in black communities compared to white communities. And he said the black consciousness espoused by Steve Biko more important than ever, calling for unity there, as you heard, amongst black people, amongst Africans themselves, saying let's stand together and fight for that economic power. All right, we take a short break. Simon will have all your sporting action, and then I'll be back at the top of the hour with all your